The so-called housing shortage, which plays such a great role in the media nowadays, does not consist in the fact that the working class generally lives in bad, overcrowded and unhealthy homes. This general shortage in housing is not something particular to the present moment. It is not even one of the sufferings particular to the modern urban worker, as distinct from all earlier oppressed classes. On the contrary, all oppressed classes, in all historical periods, suffered fairly uniformly from this shortage. And in order to put an end to this general housing shortage, there is only one means: to abolish altogether the exploitation and oppression of the working class by the ruling class. What is meant today by the housing shortage is the particular intensification of the bad housing conditions of workers as a result of the sudden increase in the population of large cities, a colossal increase in rents, still greater congestion in individual homes, and, for some, the impossibility of finding a place in which to live at all. And this particular housing shortage gets discussed so much only because it is not confined to the working class, but has affected the middle classes as well. The expansion of large modern cities gives the land in certain sections of them, particularly in those sections that are centrally located, an artificial and often enormously increasing value. The buildings already existing in these areas depress this value instead of increasing it, because they no longer correspond to the changed economic circumstances. So they are pulled down and replaced by others. This occurs above all with centrally located workers' homes, the rents for which, even with the greatest overcrowding, can never, or only very slowly, increase above a certain maximum. The result is that workers are forced out of the centre of cities and towards their outskirts, and that workers' homes, and cheap homes in general, become rare and expensive, and often altogether unattainable. For under these circumstances, the building industry, which is offered a much better field for speculation by more expensive homes, builds homes for workers only by way of exception. How is the housing question to be settled then? In present-day society, it is settled just as every other question is settled, by the gradual economic levelling of demand and supply. However, this is a settlement that reproduces the question again and again, and therefore is no settlement at all. How a social revolution would settle this question not only depends on the circumstances in each particular case, but is also connected with far more far-reaching questions, one of the most fundamental of which is the abolition of the antithesis between city and country. As it is not our task to create utopian systems for the organisation of future society, it would be more than idle to go into the question here. But one thing is certain: there is already a sufficient quantity of homes in the large cities to remedy immediately all real housing shortage, provided they are used judiciously. Naturally, this can only occur through the expropriation of the present owners by installing in their houses both homeless workers and workers living in overcrowded conditions in their present homes. As soon as the urban worker has won political power, such a measure, prompted by concern for the common good, will be just as easy to put into action as are other expropriations by the present-day state. But from where did the housing shortage come, and how did it arise? The good bourgeois is not supposed to understand that it is a necessary product of the bourgeois social order, that it cannot fail to be present in a society in which the great labouring masses are exclusively dependent upon wages, that is to say, upon the amount of the means of subsistence necessary for the continued existence and propagation of their kind, in which improvements in technology continuously throw masses of workers out of employment, in which violent and regularly occurring industrial fluctuations determine, on the one hand, the existence of a large reserved army of unemployed workers, and, on the other hand, periodically drive the mass of workers onto the streets, unemployed, in which workers are crowded together in masses in large cities at a quicker rate than homes are built for them, in which, therefore, there must always be tenants, even for the most infamous pigsties, and in which, finally, the homeowner, in his capacity as capitalist, has not only the right, but, by reason of competition, to a certain extent also the duty of ruthlessly making as much out of his property in home rent as he possibly can. In such a society, the housing shortage is no accident. It is a necessary institution and can be abolished together with all its ill effects on health and so on, only if the whole social order from which it derives is fundamentally refashioned. That, however, the bourgeoisie dare not understand. They dare not explain the housing shortage as arising from existing conditions. Therefore, it has no other way but to explain the housing shortage, but by moralizing that it is the result of the wickedness of man, the result of original sin, so to speak. Whoever declares that capitalist economic relations, which are the iron laws of present-day society, are inviolable, and yet at the same time would like to abolish their unpleasant but necessary consequences, has no other recourse than to deliver moral sermons to capitalists. Moral sermons whose emotional effects immediately evaporate under the influence of private interest and competition. Yet the building of homes for workers is profitable from the point of view of capitalists, even when not every law of hygiene is trampled underfoot. That has never been denied. Any investment of capital that satisfies an existing need is profitable if conducted rationally. The question, however, is precisely why the housing shortage continues to exist despite this. Why, despite this, the capitalists do not provide sufficient healthy homes for workers. And the real answer to this question is that capital does not want to abolish the housing shortage, even if it could. This has by now been firmly established. By the same token, it is perfectly clear that the state, as it exists today, is neither able nor willing to do anything to remedy the housing calamity. The state is nothing but the organised collective power of the possessing classes, that is, the landowners and the capitalists, as against the exploited classes, the urban and the agricultural workers. What the individual capitalists, and it is here only a question of these, because in this matter the landowner acts primarily in his capacity as a capitalist. So what the individual capitalists do not want, their state also does not want. If, therefore, individual capitalists deplore the housing shortage, but can hardly be moved to alleviate even superficially its most terrifying consequences, then the collective capitalist, which is the state, will not do much more. At most, it will see to it that that measure of superficial alleviation that has become customary is carried out everywhere uniformly. In recent British Acts of Parliament, giving London building authorities the right of expropriation for the purpose of constructing new streets, a certain amount of consideration is given to the workers evicted from their homes. A provision has been inserted that the new buildings to be erected must be suitable for housing those classes of the population previously living there. Large 5- or 6-storey tenement houses are therefore erected for the workers on the least valuable sites. And in this way the letter of the law is complied with. At best, however, these buildings will provide new homes for barely a quarter of the best workers actually evicted by the new building developments. In reality, the bourgeoisie has only one method of settling the housing question, after its fashion, which is to say, by settling it in such a way that the solution continually reposes the question. By this, I do not mean merely the specific manner of bulldozing long, broad streets through closely built working-class neighbourhoods and lining them on both sides with large and luxurious buildings. The intention of which is, on the one hand, to develop an urban working class in the building trades dependent on the government, and, on the other, to turn the city into a place of luxury, pure and simple. I also mean the practice, which has now become general, of making inroads into the working class neighbourhoods of our large cities, particularly in those that are situated centrally, irrespective of whether this practice is accompanied by considerations of public health and beautification, or by the demand for big, centrally located business premises, or by traffic requirements such as the laying down of railways and streets. No matter how different the reasons may be, the result is everywhere the same. The most run-down alleyways and lanes disappear to the accompaniment of lavish self-glorification by the bourgeoisie on account of this tremendous success. But they immediately appear again somewhere else. The infamous holes and cellars in which capitalism confines its workers night after night are not abolished. They are merely shifted elsewhere. The same economic necessity that produced them in the first place reproduces them in the next place. As long as capitalism continues to exist, it is foolish to hope for an isolated settlement of the housing question, or of any other question affecting the lot of workers. The only solution lies in the abolition of capitalism and the appropriation of all means of subsistence and instruments of labour by the working class itself. Friedrich Engels, May 1872 to January 1873.